yourself a cold one.
They strike 'em, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of The College Draft.
Yeah, it's Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast, presented, of course, by DraftKings. A lot of people playing best ball, fantasy football right now on DraftKings. That's amazing. Play against me and Joe Dolan. Just take advantage of any of the sponsors you hear on the show or you see over on the sponsor page at rosstucker.com. Heck, just use the code ROSS at DraftKings or DK Sportsbook. Whatever you do, though, you got to email it to me, ross at rosstucker.com. That way I see it and can enter you into the next best ball draft with me and Joe over at DraftKings. You can always check me out on social media at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. And I know I said it's Daddy Soda time, but it is funny that we do this show on Monday mornings because Daddy Soda, that's about the last thing I feel like having after the last 5 days, Vegas to Dallas to the Jersey Shore. Although I got a Princeton football event later on tonight, and I will be having a couple Daddy Sodas there. It's hard work, Emory. It's hard work keeping up with my social calendar, I guess.
When you're a superstar, man, when you are the new John Madden, when people recognize you everywhere you go, it's a hard life, Ross. But like you said, that's the life you chose, man.
Yeah, I don't know about all that. I just gotta do a better job drinking like light beers like Labatt Blue instead of some of those IPAs. That helps quite a bit. All right, this is kind of crazy, Emory. Today we're going to talk about the Big Ten. And of course, when I talk about Emory, talk about one of my favorite people in the industry who you should all follow on social media at FBall Game Plan on Twitter, Football Game Plan on YouTube. And I still think, I would say until like September 1, you're good to go to get the footballgameplan.com/2024 draft guide, because it almost becomes like a handy dandy guide for you to have during the preseason games. You know, every preseason game ends up going on NFL Network, so you can watch like all of them. A lot of them are live. There'll be a lot of guys out there you don't know much about. Emory does. Emory already did a scouting report on them, and so you should check it out. Here, you know why I love Emory, right? First of all, he actually does the work. That's the little secret that people that want to get into the industry don't always know. It's a lot of work. Like if you want to actually know players and know what you're talking about, it's a lot of work, number one. And then number two, he loves it. He loves it as much as I do. And I have a healthy appreciation for people that love the sport as much as I do. I mean, Emory was going all over the place before he was even making any money doing this thing. And now, as his career flourishes more and more, I couldn't be happier and prouder. And this is a little bit weird, Emory. The Big Ten, there's so many good prospects. I mean, adding those 4 Pac-12 schools, I don't know, like, would you say these are your 10 top prospects or the 10 you want to talk about the most? I know we got 10. I might ask you about some others, but how are we categorizing the 10 players you are discussing in the Big Ten today?
Mostly just keep an eye on these guys. You know, there's so many prospects outside of the 10 that we have listed here in this new Big Ten, which is now 14 to 16 teams, however many teams it is. And there's literally probably 10 prospects on each team. But we only have so much time in the show because we'll always get comments like, how could you not mention this guy? How could you not mention this guy? Well, it's not a ranking. It's just a watch list, guys, that you want to keep an eye on. And yes, the guy you're going to mention in the comments, yes, watch him too.
You know what's funny? Not even joking. It could be 10 Ohio State guys.
Right.
It could be 10. With all the guys they had come back, they have at least 10 guys that'll get drafted. So you could have just chosen, this whole show could be the Ohio State show. We're not going to do that. We're going to bounce it around a little bit to a bunch of different schools. There are some guys not on Emory's list that I'm going to throw at you as well, Emory, just because I'm curious about him. Don't know how much work he did on him or not to this point. Your number one guy, though, or at least the number one guy on your list, seems to be the number one prospect in the Big Ten, almost no matter who you talk to, and that's Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan.
Yeah, and he is someone that excels in zone coverage, great ball skills, great instincts, just has what I like to always say, good all-around game. When you look at someone that and how to play the cornerback position, he plays it really well. I think the biggest thing for him, if we're projecting forward in the NFL draft and throughout the draft process, will be how fast he runs, what's his time speed, because he's playing off coverage. He does a good job in driving on the ball and stuff like that. But everybody will want to get infatuated with, is he 4.3 fast? Is he 4.4 fast? But I just like the fact that he can cover anybody in the country, and he doesn't miss an opportunity to turn the ball
over. Speaking of that, it was 2 years ago where JT, and it's funny because I did an Ohio State game last year, but right now I'm not feeling as confident in the pronunciation of his last name. You guys all know who I'm talking about. For Ohio State, the defensive end, JT Tuimoloau, something like that. Anyway, 2 years ago, Emory, I'm not exaggerating, he single-handedly beat Penn State. He single-handedly won that game. Maybe the most dominant performance by a college player on defense that I've ever seen. He had can't remember how many sacks, fumble, might have returned it for a touchdown, definitely had a pick six. I mean, it was just bananas. And I thought he would go pro that year. I don't think he was eligible. I'm really surprised he didn't go pro after this past year. That's pretty rare for a guy 2 years ago to have that kind of game, and he's still in college 2 years later. What do you see when you watch JT?
Hustle. And hustle can get you a lot of sacks and pressures and big plays on a football field. You kind of take it for granted. You kind of think everybody on the field hustles, but when you actually see someone hustling, it stands out. And that's what really stands out for him, because he can win with, how people say he converts speed to power. He can do that. He has a great sense of timing, which I love. Like, hey, they need a big play here, and that references the game you're talking about. He was the one making the big play. And I feel like if he continues to round out his game, maybe use his hands a little bit more, he can really start to elevate and go higher in the draft than many people expect. So, yes, he's a very good pass rusher. He wins, with hustle and wins with some technique, but there's room to grow there. But I just think he's a really good player at a position where, on the other side, you have another guy that he got better as the season went on, and we'll get to him later. But now you have two bookends of defensive ends at Ohio State, which is why a lot of people are excited about them coming into the season.
Well, let's just do it now. You mentioned him, Jack Sawyer, the other edge rusher for Ohio State.
And Sawyer wins more with power, probably more on the rush side of things in terms of the running side. Like, he's going to be a good run defender. He does a good job of chasing the play, going away, while, JT is a more twitchy guy. So you kind of have both types of ends on opposite sides that give you what you want on the defensive line. Now, he was one of these highly touted super recruits coming out of high school, and didn't really, hit the ground running, but everybody develops at a different time. And if the back end of the season last year is more of an inclination of what we're going to see moving forward, then he's right on schedule to hit his peak as he goes into the NFL. So I like what we saw on the back end of the year, because now that gives him the added confidence, and now it gives that defense a little bit more punch on both ends of the defensive line.
You know who he reminds me of a little bit? And I know people will say this is called helmet scouting, and it is. But when you're comparing people, if someone was at the same school and had similar traits, then that's going to happen. He reminds me a little bit of Sam Hubbard from the Bengals. You
That's a
know,
good one.
like he's not a physical phenom, but Hubbard was a really good athlete. He was like a lacrosse recruit to Notre Dame or something. And Hubbard, I mean, look, Hubbard's had like that playoff game against the Ravens where he had like that long fumble return for touch. He's a good athlete, but Hubbard's not like Trey Hendrickson. He's not a 15 sack guy, but he plays the run, and he's like, you'd be happy with him as a starting defensive end in the NFL, Sam Hubbard. That's kind of who Sawyer reminds me of a little bit. Maybe he ends up becoming more than that, but like just as a reminder here, if you draft a guy and they end up becoming a solid starter, that is a home run. You know how hard that is to get? I mean, that's a home run if Sawyer ends up becoming Sam Hubbard.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, everybody can't be superstars. You need good, solid football players that play at the NFL level. And if you're a starter, you are checking that box. And there's no downside to having a guy that is dependable, reliable, and solid. That to me is exactly what you want when you're drafting a player.
That's what I want too, Emory, when I'm looking for a gift. I mention this all the time on the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. I should mention it here too. Anybody out there I said earlier, you can get into the Fantasy Feast Best Ball Contest. You know the best way to do that? Get a loved one a customized story written all about them from myfrontpagestory.com. By far the coolest gift you can get a loved one. Mom, dad, sibling, spouse, whatever, anniversary, birthday, retirement, reunion, whatever you got coming up, myfrontpagestory.com. Let's get Emory to a couple of Penn State guys. This first guy, I love this guy. I loved his high school tape. I love his tape now. I kind of thought he was going to go to the NFL. He didn't. For all I know, he might end up being the number one tight end. If they actually throw him the ball a lot, look out. I'm talking about Tyler Warren from Penn State. Emory, he was a good high school quarterback, ran all over the place, except sometimes they would put him out at receiver and just throw him fade balls. Like they put this little quarterback in, throw him fade balls, and Tyler Warren would go up and jump. I mean, he was that kind of athlete, wildcat quarterback, wide receiver. And now what I love about him, he's not just a tight end. He's a tight end that'll try to knock you on your you-know-what.
And I'm glad you brought up his high school, film, because it also ties into what we're seeing now. Because one of the biggest things that I notice about his game is how good he is with the ball in his hands in terms of run after catch. Like, he is looking to score the ball. And when you have someone that is so savvy at running after the catch and how natural he is in terms of catching the football, and you put those two traits together, you have an elite prospect. And you're right, he may end up being the number one tight end because this is someone that is going to be, he could be your Sam Laporta type. He can be the George Kittle type. He could be someone that you can see as a fixture and a featured player in a passing offense. This is why it always frustrates you when you look at Penn State from a team-wise and like, man, they have legitimately talent everywhere. Like, this team should always be a consistent 10-11 win team. Probably should have 2 national championships already, but here we are. But yes, Warren is one of those dudes that we're going to be talking about as a first-round pick come 2025 draft.
Well, they are a consistent 10-win team. They just can't beat Michigan or Ohio State. They just can't do it, and they haven't done it in a while, and it's a problem. And by the way, I live in central Pennsylvania, so I follow along with Penn State. All my, everybody that lives around here is fans of them. Absolutely maddening, because I will say this, Emory, last year, by far the worst position group they had was their receivers, yet they were in 11 personnel, 3 receivers all the time. And one reason why Tyler Warren should have a huge year, last year he had to split reps with Theo Johnson, who I think the Giants took in the 3rd round. They're saying he might start at tight end for the Giants, yet he's splitting reps with Tyler Warren last year. Yet no matter which one was out there, the offensive coordinator, Mike Yurcich, just did not want to throw them the ball. I mean, think about that for a second. You have 2 tight ends that are day 1 or day 2 picks at the same time. Think about, Emory, if you're creative, the bind that they could have put defensive coordinators in. Have both those guys detach. Now you got 4 receivers. Have them both in line. Now you got 7 blockers. It's the whole, Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez thing. And yet Penn State just wouldn't do it. Anyway, whatever. The guy throwing them the ball is Drew Allar. He's a big kid. I met him last summer. Big kid, really strong arm, did not throw picks, had some really good numbers. But Emory, kind of like the rest of the team, did not play as well as he needed to against Michigan or Ohio State.
It's just to add some more salt to the wound, too. How about having a great offensive line with those 2 great tight ends and 2 great running backs? Insane. You know what I'm saying?
Both their offensive tackles might start in the NFL this year. Caden Wallace might be the left tackle for the Patriots. Fashanu was the 11th pick. The center, Norzad, went in the 5th round. Their guards are both back. And yeah, Singleton was the Big Ten freshman of the year before. I will say this, though. In fairness to Penn State, Michigan and Ohio State are really, really good. They're really, really good. It's very, very, very hard to beat them.
Shout out to the Big Ten. And here's the thing about Drew Allar. If you remember last year, I was high on him a lot coming into the season. I had picked Penn State to get to the Final Four, the college football playoff. Yeah. And because of what we saw in that Purdue game, that's all I need to see. I was like, man, this guy is throwing the ball deep down the field. He's throwing with accuracy. He's throwing with timing. He's got a better arm than Matt McGloin. This is a win for Penn State. They finally got their new Kerry Collins, right? And when you watch him throw, he got a little Will Levis to him in terms of his build, how easy the ball comes off his hand, out of his hand. It's a little flick. He can get the ball anywhere he wants. He is checking all the throwing boxes that you want, but you want to see it more consistently in the bigger games. Now, I don't know if that was a play calling thing or a risk averse thing. I don't want to make the bad play to put our offense back, but he has to let it go this year because he has the talent. They have the run game. They'll be fine. They can play complementary football. Him coming off a play action is solid. You saw him throw a great ball to Warren in the Maryland game. He was making some great tight window throws inside the red zone. And the fact that he doesn't turn the ball over in terms of picks is always key because he's making good choices in terms of where he's throwing the football. But sometimes you got to throw to the covered guy. And I feel like you want to see that next step for him this season.
Let's talk about one of the newbies, Emory. Jabbar Muhammad, the DB from Oregon. Oregon has a bunch of prospects. Muhammad might be the best one.
Muhammad has played at 15 schools already, but has been good at all of them. I love how, athletic he is in terms of a slot corner. He's a click and close type player, drive on the football, always active at the catch point. Give me these type of cornerbacks 10 times out of 10. You saw I tweeted out yesterday about Cordell Jackson out of Austin P, who's playing for the Edmonton Elks. They tried this dude all throughout the game, and he wouldn't relent. Had an interception after I tweeted out the props I gave him. Jabbar Muhammad plays exactly the same way. They'll try him because he's 5'10", but they'll be upset because he's never going to back down. He's going to always make a play on the ball.
Oregon's got the receivers, too. Tez Johnson and that other kid as well. Evan Stewart, absolutely loaded. Let's get to the position you played, Emory. Running back, the 2 guys you have listed, Donovan Edwards from Michigan, who had the big college football playoff games, and then Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State. So interesting that he left Ole Miss to go be with Travion Henderson at Ohio State. I'm fascinated by that dynamic. Maybe he didn't want as many touches. I don't know.
Especially since people are saying Ole Miss is a dark horse national title contender and should be a lock for the playoffs this year in the 12-team format. So to leave that situation and come to Ohio State, it's not like you're not going to make the playoffs. But you're right. I love his footwork. He is quick. He is, agile. He can bounce across gaps. So he has some good skill set he brings to the table. Edwards, to me, has great acceleration. I thought he was a better runner, than a more explosive runner than what they had last year in Blake Corum. And so Donovan Edwards, his style kind of reminds me of Devonta Freeman. He's a one-cut downhill acceleration and go type back. So Travion Henderson is a good back, kind of reminds me of a lot of Doug Martin. So we got a lot of good backs here in the Big Ten this upcoming season once again.
So he reminds you of Devonta Freeman, but you thought he was better than Blake Corum.
I thought he was a little bit better than Blake Corum because it felt like Corum was a solid runner, but Edwards to me was more of the game breaker. And if you go back to even the previous year when they upset Ohio State at Ohio State, it was Edwards that just really kept breaking these back-breaking runs against the Buckeyes.
Yeah, you're right. He's definitely more explosive, that's for sure. No question about it. How about the name on this guy? D lineman from USC. What a perfect name for a D lineman. Although it's kind of weird. He doesn't sound like a guy that should be going to USC. He should go to like Minnesota or something. Bear Alexander.
And this is going to be the next theme with these two defensive linemen. Bear Alexander is super quick off the ball. Disruptive force. This is one where, he's able to force the quarterback off the spot. He makes a lot of plays because he plays an aggressive game. So I love that about what he brings to the table. You have to with your first name, Bear. And Michigan's Mason Graham might be the best defensive lineman in the Big Ten because of how active he is off the ball, how violent he is with his hands. He's probably your ideal 3-tech because he can whip guards all day long. You can kick him over the center. He's able to quickly make a move and get in the backfield. So he's a strong interior rusher. He has good eyes, makes plays follow the football and then makes the play. I think he's another one of these top half of the first round type picks.
Yeah, he's really, really good. I mean, he dominated in the college football playoff as well. I was thoroughly impressed by him. It's funny, too, because, just looking at some of the guys we didn't even talk about or that weren't even on your list. How about Ohio State? Guys like Denzel Burke at corner. Very surprised he stayed in school. And some people are saying they think Tyleik Williams, the D tackle, Emory, might be the best of the bunch in terms of the Ohio State prospects.
Even Emeka Egbuka, the receiver,
Yeah.
I feel like he's been there for 7 years, right? It's weird because it's funny how we're starting to see football and talk about football and how we talk about college basketball, where if a guy stays past his junior season or in college basketball, if he stays past his sophomore season, what's the problem? You know what I'm saying? But I like it that you're seeing a lot of these senior-laden football teams. Now we know NIL changes the dynamics, but I like seeing these veteran players, and that's why people are looking at Ohio State. I also feel like it'll come down to their quarterback, Will Howard, if he's the starter, because he could get challenged by the young guy that they have out there. And so when you have such talent-laden teams that are stacked on both sides of the ball, it puts a lot of onus on the quarterback that you brought in as a grad transfer and one that is going to be working with Chip Kelly. So that's going to be a whole fascinating thing to watch.
Yeah, I'm still fascinated how Will Howard from Eastern PA went to Kansas State. And this is the second Philly kid in a row Ohio State's going to have a quarterback. McCord was from St. Joe's Prep in Philly. Will Howard's from suburban Philly in Downingtown. We didn't even talk. Penn State has a couple good edge rushers. Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter, which is interesting, Emory. Abdul was a very good linebacker the last couple of years. He said, I want to play edge rusher. Saw what money those guys were getting in the NFL. What do you think of that move?
I love it because he kind of reminds me of what they had last year in Adisa Isaac, somebody that can also be a sandbacker but can rush. So now you bring him down closer, a little bit more twitch coming off the corner, and Penn State just knows how to get twitch from these type of players.
Well, he's got number 11. He trains at times with Micah Parsons. Number 11 at Penn State. You better be good, bro.
Because I was thinking LeVar Arrington, but you're right.
Yeah, LeVar Arrington, Micah Parsons, you better be good if they're going to give you, they call them the sticks. Stick safe. They give you number 11. Like, good luck. You better be ready to roll. He's Emory Hunt at F-Ball Game Plan. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. Next week, the Big 12. The keg is kicked. We are all tapped out.
Thanks for tuning in to College Draft. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and Fantasy Feast, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.